Good evening. I'm Selwyn Collins, your host of CWS Conversations with Selwyn. Thank you for joining us. Those of you who are joining us for the first time, a very special thank you. CWS is about having conversations with people about their journey and how they're using their gifts and talents to help others. So I'm always looking for people who are doing extraordinary things or doing things extraordinarily well because I believe that we are never more connected than when we share our stories. Not so much to glorify ourselves by our successes, but to share some of our challenges and how we might have overcome them, how often we got up when we fell. Tonight, our guest is Mr. Richard Young from Trinidad, one of the gems of the Caribbean. I'm going to take a short break and introduce you to Richard when I return.
And it was just a wonderful experience.
I had a great time. I always have a great time when I come here. There was one week when I came here 3 times.
Very simple, good food, good friends, amazing staff. I can't complain.
We are back. The gentleman next to me is Mr. Richard Young. Richard, good evening and welcome to CWS.
Good evening. Thanks for having me.
You're quite welcome, Richard. Richard Young has grown to become a recognizable staple in the Caribbean fashion landscape. Over the past 25 years, his extensive talent as a stylist, production designer, fashion coordinator, and prolific impresario has led to him becoming one of the most sought after creative industry consultants in the region. He has been working consistently producing fashion, beauty, and cultural industry related events from the Bahamas in the north or the archipelago in the Guyanas in South America, with North American stints in Miami, New York, Toronto, and Montreal. Richard's passion for things Caribbean has become legendary. To date, the widely celebrated professional is producing innovative fashion showings, exhibitions, cataloging, curating, and styling creative cultural layouts, and consulting on a wide range of creative industry related projects. His involvement in the areas of branding, image consultancy, event production management has spanned projects endorsing youth empowerment initiatives, customer relations practices, and art direction for television and video. He's consumed by an avid preoccupation with our distinctive way of expressing ourselves. This he deems our idiosyncratic Caribbean style. Its attendant, dynamic, and creative merchandising approach is driven by his imitable fervor, continue to celebrate our Caribbean authentic while uniquely positioning the brand to the world unapologetically. In spite of his crusading Caribbean mission, he never loses sight of universal yet intrinsic precepts as he seeks to maintain relevance to the very changing needs of the global fashion industry. My brother, welcome.
Thank you.
Richard, what does being Caribbean and Trinidadian mean to you?
Wow. Being Caribbean, which I see myself to be more than just stating that I'm intrinsically Trinidadian or Trinbagonian, because I think Caribbean comes with not only with the geography, it comes with the history, it comes with a socio-political dynamic, and it comes with something that is special because in this part of the world there is a plural cosmopolitan society that I think sometimes we ourselves are unaware of and sometimes we don't celebrate. And since I was young, I was very observant and I latched onto the things that made me uniquely and distinctively Caribbean and Trinbagonian. And I didn't dismiss it. I grew up with people wanting to dismiss what was naturally theirs. I grew up with people not wanting to endorse the colloquial, local flavors that I thought made us special. And and that's what I sought after to celebrate. So I look at my whole life as aiming towards finding a way to let people experience and express this unique flavor, and that's what I've been working on, and I just channel it into my different projects.
With all the awards and accolades, tell us, Richard, how would you describe your career?
Well, it was very difficult for me to put a handle on it, and I'm still grappling with that. I came to say that I'm a production designer because I design production. I have been called an event maker and an event manager, and I've actually tutored in it. But I think it's just finding a unique way of saying that we have a different artistic expression here in the Caribbean,
Mhm.
and definitely for us to accept it and to appreciate it and give accolades it. And so I find interesting ways of doing it. When I talk with young people, when I do an advertising campaign, when I do a photographic layout, when I do makeup, when I do a backdrop for a show, when I write script for a production, it all constantly reminds us that we are Caribbean. And not only just remind us, but celebrate this. We celebrate this uniqueness. So that's what I think my purpose has become. It's my métier, it's my conviction, it's my way of keeping grounded, it's my way of feeling centered, it's my way of feeling confident and sure because this is where I belong and this is what I'm about. And it happens naturally. So, I have a wonderful philosophy that I call we're fashionable by nature. We are naturally exhibitionistic and we don't need to shy away from it. We need to state it. We need to organize it systematically and present it to the world so that they can understand and appreciate it and continue with their fascination with it because the world is fascinated with the way we do what we do. And I recognize that. And I didn't have to leave the Caribbean. Most of my friends in the 80s left and they went to the metropolis. And then I hear them missing the sweetness, as they call it, of our culture. And I was always recognizing it. And I didn't have to go away to miss it. And therefore, I think my responsibility was to shape it for those who stayed and to remind those who left what is special about this part of the world.
When did this all begin? What are the series of events that led you down this career path? And do you remember where you were when you made this decision?
Wow, that's a special question there. I would say that there was a knowledge of my difference, for want of a better word, and difference in the sense of I was always observant, and I know I was greatly influenced by an aunt of mine called Jean Coggin Simmons. She has passed on, and she celebrated the folk and the indigenous ways of dance and movement. So I was always peeping into her world literally as a voyeur from aside at her dance studio and examining the discipline with which she conducted her exercises and how necessary it was to appreciate what art and culture do for the human development in this part of the world. And so my own studies, which was along the literature line and language skills and sociology and history, all I think cohered for me to cohere and made a statement that I have now solidified and concretized. I fell into the fashion almost as an accident. I was really consumed with using the stage as a place to remind people of things, to provoke thought, to celebrate our identity. I'm very, very consumed with identity branding. And so it helped me shape the fashion because at the time I was doing this, the fashion was igniting itself in the late 80s in the Caribbean. And everybody was looking for a way to show the fashion, to merchandise and market. And I thought it was necessary for us to look at a way and a methodology that was ours, intrinsically, idiosyncratically ours, and not just to plagiarize, as Naipaul says, be mimic men of first world ways. So I took this information, as it were, of dance and theater and drama and the understanding from behind the scenes and on stage and being in the audience and consolidated a methodology. And people started liking it. It started interesting people, and therefore the lead designer started using me to merchandise their stuff. And then organizations asked me to do shows to incorporate their staff, and people wanted the models trained and organized. So the show has a larger statement than just saying buy the shirt and buy the trouser. So I started using the stage in a very responsible way, which is what art is really supposed to do, and to signal and to give messages and to make people laugh and sometimes almost want to cry and just think about serious things while they're looking at fashion and ultimately still purchasing. So I serve to vend for the creative artist, but I also serve to employ in some cases the people of the artistic world, the dancers, the actors, the musicians, to color and shape and give life to the creative medium, to what I wanted to say. So in a way, I use my sensibilities and my perception of the world, use it on the stage and realize that people are buying into it. And it kind of grew, and as a result of that, it reinforced my belief in what I was doing. And all of a sudden, I was standing there without precedent. There was no one like me doing it. There was no one before me doing it. What am I doing? And it just kept moving. Every 5 or 6 years, there was a diversifying. I was just doing local things until I was doing annual projects that ran for 10 years, every single year in Trinidad and Tobago. And then it extended to the Caribbean. And then I had an agency in Trinidad, and then there were 6 agencies in the region, and I was popping up and down doing training. And then I got a few stints in the diaspora. And so people were looking in, seeing, and sending for me, and I was working. I started working. In the first 10 years, it wasn't work. I got a handout. I got a box of chocolates. I got flowers on stage, and everybody said, that's the man who's doing something different. And I did a lot of interviews and a lot of fame and no fortune.
So,
And so that's how I kept moving.
so when do you think it actually began? Around what age?
Well, when I was about 20 something, and to me, I was a lot more confident in a way. There was a lot more bravura. There was a lot more thirst. There was a lot more drive.
Hmm.
I knew what it had to be. And I looked around and thought that the other people around weren't understanding it, but they were willing to move in that direction. So great artists and great people I had great respect for. And one of them is called Jeffrey Stanford. He is passed. And Christopher Panero, who has moved on to Toronto, who's a textile artist. They believed in my approach and facilitated me and allowed and said, let him do it. Let him do it his way. Because somebody has to take the lead in doing this new way, this new world way, and then it started building a philosophy, because I always had a philosophy behind it. It was not accidental. It was always about understanding the allure that the Caribbean has and turning it around to market it
You know what?
and
I,
make people come to it. Yeah.
I want to explore your artistic or your career trajectory. But when one speaks with you, Richard, after the first few
Yeah.
sentences, it is one immediately is drawn to your passion for the Caribbean, its art, culture, and its history. When would you say this intimate? I know around 20 something, as you said, you were drawn to this career path. But this intimacy with the Caribbean, when did this actually begin? Did this begin when you start down the career path, or did this evolve as you start expressing yourself?
It evolved, and there was no immediate direction.
Mm-hmm.
On reflection, because I'm an existentialist, I believe that you're constantly becoming, and you only can be defined on reflection. And when I was younger, I remembered a particular situation that stuck with me. My mother would say, "What are you looking at when you're looking at the television?" Because I would not be making comments about the storyline. I would be making comments about the set and the costuming and the continuity with respect to the hair and makeup. At 8 and 9 years, I'll see what her hair looks slightly different from the scene before. And I started working out that the scenes were probably not shot sequentially. and details like that. And I would make a reference to the sound and if it was making sense to the type of show it was. And I was involved in a lot of texture and subtexture, and I was fascinated by that. And I always liked too the vernacular and the colloquialism. I didn't think that you needed to say it's bad English because there was a it was so rich in cultural relevance that sometimes you need to use it. So I was able to master the language of English, and I'm still mastering it because I always see you becoming, as I said. And but I always informed it with inflections of colloquialism, and people used to think I was funny. So when I was 10 years old and they asked me, what do you want to become? I said, I want to become a comedian. I like seeing people smile. I like seeing people happy. I want people to like things around them and not be aspiring to things that are a little too elusive. I wanted people to be grounded and feel good about where they are, whether they catch water at the standpipe. That's a wonderful story if you tell it well. And you could tell me something about your catching water at the standpipe that I would never have shared or experienced. So that happened in my, I'm very young, and during my teenage life, I started dancing. I started the drama group in my school with some other young, some young guys, and I was in the choir. So I was on the stage and always wanting to understand what the perception of me on stage was. So I wanted to go into the eye of the beholder and see how I can manipulate what they see to make sure that they see what I want them to see. So it was very, very important. So I was always plagued, not plagued, but always fascinated with that, and always was concerned about orchestrating how you perceived what I want you to see.
Richard,
You know, so
did this
that is where I went.
did this intelligence, this artistic intelligence of or this intimacy with your audience or understanding what your audience is seeing, did this begin, you said, as a teenager and so
As a
young?
teenager, as a teenager,
Did you understand it when you first when it first came when you first came upon it or it came upon you? Did you understand what it meant?
no, never understood the scope of it. Was always preoccupied with it. It always distracted me sometimes and made things awkward. It also gave me revelations that made me feel that sometimes that I had an edge on the knowing and the seeing of things that people seem to miss. I was always in tune with slapstick and comedy and the timing of lines and how you can arrest people and how you can grip their attention. So people thought, as I said, I had a comedic bias because I think comedians are the most observant people because you have to slow down life, slow down a slow motion of serious things makes it very laughable. And and you have to have a grip of the language to roll it out, as they say in literature, to unravel it, so the other person can feel the emotion and texture of an experience. So I was always caught up in it, but not at the depth that I can speak about it now. But I know that I was caught up in that. So I would be preoccupied with myself when I did my literature, because I did French literature and English literature, and we always had to understand what the author was trying to say, what was going on at the time when he was saying it, make more sense than just my understanding of it. You know, my understanding is one interpretation of it, but I needed to get a complete or attempt to understand a complete interpretation of whatever work we are doing. And that indulgence is what I could say was my first sign of this movement that I ended up doing. You know?
Richard, you have piqued my curiosity, and I want you to help me only because some things that you've just said, I believe, is very important for young people that may be listening. And in terms of let's take Trinidad. I mean, I can speak for Guyana, but I think the Caribbean region of its on a whole. The other day when you were talking, you spoke about insular presentation. What I want to know, Richard, simply is, as teenagers, we have influences. Some of us conform, some don't. But we have influences by our peers and so on and so forth. What is it in you? Where did you get this courage to A, not conform, to B, to explore this thing that you discovered or discovered you about how you can manipulate your audience view of you.
Well,
When you came in contact with that, where did you get the courage to not resist it, to not be fear of it, to not be intimidated by it, but to explore it? How did that happen?
well, as again, I would say on reflection, it may be seen and deemed as courage. At the time, and also because I had a single mother situation, my father was there. My father was a very influential union man at the time, and even though he was not intimately involved with us, I still had some admiration for his charismatic qualities and how he was able to manipulate situations and hold the attention of thousands, tens of thousands of workers. And so much so that it could have impacted on governmental decisions and so. My mother was also a unionist, so they were always out in activist positions. And we would see them in the news ever so often making an impact and making change and dynamizing things. So I would not have seen it as courage per se at the time, because probably that might have created some fear. It was just an inclination to move in the direction that was seeming natural. And my mother allowed us to develop that way. She was a more open-minded mother than most at the time, because my brother moved on to become a very celebrated designer brand called The Cloth. My sister used to model at the time, and she was like in the top 3 models in the region, in the country. I modeled as well, but I came off the stage because I wanted to coordinate it. And she allowed it and fueled it and activated it. So when you are conditioned by that kind of open-mindedness and that unlimited energy, I suppose you're not going to feel boxed in like other people. So we would have gone to the folk ballets that my aunt did in the national halls in Port of Spain, and we would have gone to some of the union meetings that my mother and father would have been involved in, and we'd be hearing the responses of the people, the chants, the drums. You started understanding cultural relevance in a different way. So I would have heard the more straight-laced students talking about more expected behavior, and my world was totally different, and I felt special about the world, but I was kind of reticent at that point. I was the sliding along the wall type of student, observing, constantly analyzing, observant, not bravely going where no man has gone before. I mean, in secondary school, I took part in the drama group, and I was in the choir, and then I started dancing in my late teens and danced for the National Dance Company of Trinidad and Tobago. But all of this was just acquiring the stage posture to understand what you need to do on the stage and how you can shape it to influence others, And then, well, with more reading, I understood the other perceptions. And that was more fascinating to me than just the doing on the stage. How to mastermind and coordinate how the audience sees the world through your eyes.
Richard, if you were to, you talk about being an observer, if you were to eavesdrop a conversation between, in which your father, your mother, and let's say your brother, Robert, is telling a stranger about you, what do you imagine each of them would say? Let's start with Mom.
Well, my mother has admitted, and I have in fact eavesdropped on conversations that brought tears to my eyes, because there was an inordinate pride and almost a show-off tone, but very subtly, because she's not a boastful person. But she knew that a mark was being made, an indelible mark was being made. And the people around her would have spoken of me highly. And she moved with that more than her boasting about what my achievements might have been. Certainly, she has always come forward and endorsed and represented and stood by all of us in whatever we were doing, however non-traditional it was. So I have the most undying support and almost devotion. If I write for the paper sometimes, now I'm doing a column in one of our newspapers every Sunday, and she makes it her duty to get it and to talk to her friends about it. And sometimes it really takes me. You know, it moves me how she is committed to the view. You know, sometimes not even understanding it totally, but certainly sharing it because she saw the whole thing roll out and how it evolved. My brother, I can say again, made a statement most recently at my birthday party, which was a few months ago, and I mean, I definitely had a tear-stained face, and he too, he said that he sees me as a pioneer because I allowed my life to roll out on a national field, and allowed my mistakes to be seen and my achievements to be acknowledged in this open national space. And he thought that that was a pioneering position, and he is immensely proud of me. And I was like, my Adam's apple hit my belly, because I've never heard him say anything like that. You know, sometimes he always tries to be polite because he doesn't want us to look. Because both our names, to some degree, ring on its own, and sometimes there is a confusion where they think I am him, because the cloth is a very significant brand, and so people would say, "Oh, Richard, you're of the cloth," and I am not of the cloth, you know. And we kind of revolutionized the way that shows were presented, because that's what his brand was about. Very similar to my thinking, but so I activated the thoughts he would have had. So we kind of revolutionized the way shows are done. So that's what I felt from him. And only in recent times, just before my father passed, because he never really had a high regard for the arts, because he's very militant. He was very militant and very unionistic. And one day, Beloved was playing on television, and there's a Toni Morrison piece that Oprah produced. And he had read the book. I hadn't, but I looked as though I was appreciating the movie in its fullest. So he asked me a question about the movie, which at the time we barely grunted at one another. And I was in disbelief that he was chatting with me. And then I said yes, and I said, well, that is a psychological reality that the director has to manifest for us, the audience, to understand what is going on in the mind of the lead character. And he looked at me like, wow, because he said he didn't read that in the book. He didn't feel that in the book because he was widely read. And I said, well, that is just the interpretation. That's the responsibility of the director to find a way to access our psyche and for us to appreciate the depth of the emotion or the movement. And thereafter, he was drawn to me and always wanted my opinion and stuff. And he would always say, and he always referred to me as the boy in my old antique state. He would say, let the boy speak. He would tell my mother, let the boy speak. You know, and I would like, what boy? The one floating out at sea? You know, but so we had a relationship that developed in the end that was a little intellectually stimulated, because he liked to hear what I was thinking, because he thought I was involved in airy-fairy stuff, walking models and pretty things and clothes. And another time he went into my room, and I have a shelf that picks up an entire wall of books that I had read. And he didn't even know. And he asked, what are those things doing there? And my mother said, well, those are books that Richard would have read. And, you know, he studied sociology, and he does languages and literature and stuff. And so that is the perception of my immediate family there. And my sister is my biggest fan. And they always encourage me. And my responsibility to them is always to be very logical and very analytical, to validate what I do in a sensible way, so that even if somebody doesn't believe in my vision, they will understand it.
Richard,
and that was what I needed.
You mentioned branding just now. How important is professional branding, and what are your thoughts on personal branding?
It's very important for identity, almost to precede you. you know, and as much as uh, as long as you're involved in the arts, entertainment, promotion, fashion, you need to individually craft uh, uh, an entity or a spirit that precedes you and practices you, so that that's the story that initiates the knowledge of you, and that is what really sells. So that is what the brand is. The brand is when you create a mystique and you energize the mystery, and you appeal to the fascination that exists, and you craft the way people interact and confront it, and that is the world I like. And that's where it's very textural. So I am in the world before the garment, before the item reaches the counter, before the item crosses hands from the maker to the wearer. I'm in the world that already exists. The fascination of the Caribbean exists before we start even living here. Even when there was slavery, even when there was the eradication of the Amerindians, and you read the journals and you read the documentation of the observers, it always was shrouded and in a beautiful integument of this special place, this paradise space, these wonderful lands that were bounced upon accidentally when they were going to the east to find silks and spices. And as I always tell people, we have now become the silk and the spice of the new world. And we need to no longer accidentally lure people there. So since that exists, since this almost mythical thing exists, how to go into that realm and coordinate it and make people have a buy-in, to interest investors, to interest buyers, to interest adventure seekers, culture buffs, anthropologists, new fashion direction. Like I met Jean-Paul Gaultier in Martinique, walking the streets. He said, where else would I go for new inspiration? He was in the marketplace looking at the beads and seeds and all of the accessorizing that comes from the indigenous branding of this part of the world. And you know, so I am so encouraged by our music and our way of walking and our way of smiling. And I tell people sometimes I just sit and observe, and I'm in glory observing that even somebody who is empty-pocketed and hungry and even a little mentally deranged walk with a confidence and the head back and a smile that seems to consume them. And it's almost like this sun and this space and this air is a special place.
Well then,
And
Richard.
if we take that,
Well then,
yes,
well then, let me ask you this, and this is not a judgment question, but I'm going to frame it this way: do you believe the average Caribbean embraces the idea of a Caribbean brand? And if not,
no, no, and that is
what needs to be
that is
done
the
to change that
tragedy.
mindset? Huh?
And I think that is the tragedy. It is not. It is slowly evolving. And I do even know if it's going to happen in my lifetime. So therefore now that has become, as I tell you, my conviction. My conviction is to find ways, and I have with some degree of success. That's what success is to be measured by so many things. But I know that when I do a production, you see people coming and they come to me and say, Richard, can I get the soundtrack for the show? I love the music. Richard, do you have footage for the show? Richard, do the designer that you showed in the section with the skirts, I like the way you showed it. I like the dancers. Who is that dance company? It's just creating access for a lot of people who might have stayed unknown and underutilized. And one experience I recount when I was at Caribbean Fashion Week in Kingston, Jamaica, some years ago, there was this lady from Europe. She came in to do a special chat, and it was about the whole Caribbean aesthetic and how wonderful it is and how we need to celebrate it and to and give it life. And we were just chatting 15, 20 minutes prior to her talk. And when she went up to the talk, she invited me on and was very annoying to me. It was very embarrassing to me because when she did the intro, she said, you all should be listening to somebody else. I mean, you all should know that you all have a beauty that the world craves. But somehow when I come to this part of the world, you all seem to be always wanting to copy what is in the metropolis. We are already there. We already identify the Milan brand, the Parisian brand, the Tokyo brand, the North American brand, the British brand. You have a brand happening all around you and you seem to be missing it. So let me bring somebody on to energize you about this brand because he just energized me. And I'm sitting there staring and then she called my name and I had to go to the podium and I was like, oh my God, what is this lady doing to me? And then I said, okay, Richard Young, this is probably the point. This is probably the convex, the point where you have to now make a statement because here are industry people from the region and they're all eyes on you. And the first words that came out of my mouth is, I think that we need to love ourselves more and in that love begin to appreciate what exists and what is here. And then we need to try and shape it so people can understand its wonderfulness. And then we must tell the stories because we are anecdotal people. And if that is hanging on a swing tag, certainly it's going to stimulate a wonderful conversation piece when somebody goes back to Belgium or Oklahoma or Vancouver. And everybody looked at me and I went on and my tongue just rolled out information of 2 decades with a lot of references throughout the region. And there was a standing ovation and I could have taken my eyeballs out and dried them because I think I touched a nerve. And then I thought, yes, some of the people are now being enlightened. Mm-hmm. They thought that doing fashions, making garments that they do neatly, that they saw in a magazine, instead of them originally authenticating the identity of this plural space, this cosmopolitan backdrop, this Afro-Indo, Arab, Portuguese, Dutch, French, Spanish commingling lifestyle, you know, that we have now creolized into something that is ours. It's no longer the motherland, and we are no longer colonials. We have a brand that happened, that melded itself together and formed a new experience that we need to talk about and transpose it onto the garment, onto our art, onto our walls, onto our sets, onto our makeup styling, onto everything that represents us, our music, our dance. And
Richard,
as I say, I will go on and on about that.
Do you think this attitude, and do you think this attitude, this passion and thirst for the colonial context, you think it is more a desire to embrace that lifestyle, that to embrace the whole colonial experience versus resisting, or is it resisting what is authentically Caribbean? What is your take on it?
There is a resistance to it because I remember on more than one occasion, like I did a show in St. Lucia for the Arts and Jazz Festival. We got phenomenal reviews from most of the outsider observer and from a lot of the intelligentsia and the arts enthusiasts in St. Lucia. But you had a comment that said the show was too Caribbean. And then I remember once a designer saying, I just want to be known as a designer that happens to be living in the Caribbean. I don't want to be known as a Caribbean designer. And it almost made the bile pour out of my gallbladder. Because I am thinking, why would you not want to be Caribbean? And people are dying for a 2-week holiday in a 52-week year to land here and wiggle their toes in the sand and run on the beach and get the sun and indulge in all of our subtextual existence. All of our colloquialisms, the snow cone drinking on the road, all sorts of historical anecdotes that we live out on a daily life, a cycle, and we take for granted. So yes, there's a resistance because they feel to be a great designer, you must look like Armani, and I have the grandest respect for the brands of the world that evolved out of a 500-year history, particularly in Europe, of style and art dictates. You see, because the people in Milan are very proudly wanting to be designers that have a Milan style, and the Parisian designers are very proud of being Parisian. And the British Fashion Council creates a network of thinking that makes a British designer feel I am British. And the North American style evolved out of the post um, 18th century experience when everything was transforming to the independent republic status. And they have a brand that they're very proud of. Why wouldn't these Caribbean people who have a different life culture and a different experience not be? But now, when the European Union experts and the outside grant machines come and get themselves involved, they say, yes, you have to celebrate your Caribbeanness for us to help you. We want you to do a project and it must be indigenous. Your music that is used must be Caribbean. Your ways of production must be Caribbean oriented. You must use Caribbean materials to brand the Caribbean and make style Caribbean. Then you see a transformation happening. So it still happens as a result of an outside person telling you that that's the direction you're supposed to go into. You're not naturally doing it from inside, even though we naturally are fashionable. We're natural flair people. We have a natural way of just turning around to say hello to a friend who called you. I look at the way somebody shout out to somebody and the way you swing and look over your shoulder. We Caribbean people do those things. We have a way of greeting almost aggressively, and it's the best love in the world being shared there.
Richard,
and when you see it in slow motion, it is so vibrant.
Let's take a short break, but when we return, I want you to tell me or tell us what is the Richard Young brand, and how would you describe? And this might be an unfair question, but nobody better than you can do this. How would you describe the Caribbean brand?
Okay.
And it was just a wonderful experience.
I had a great time. I always have a great time when I come here. There was 1 week when I came here 3 times.
Very simple, good food, good friends, amazing staff. I can't complain.
We are back with Richard Young. Richard, what is the Richard Young's brand, and how would you describe the Caribbean brand?
Well, let me start with the Caribbean brand. The Caribbean brand is an evolving brand. It's part of what I think is an understanding of our new world responsibility. I mentioned earlier on how the Europeans were on their way to the East Indies. So I have a little quip that I say that no longer are we the accident of a medieval cartographer's miscalculation under the assumption that there was not a West Indies existing. Now that we are fully aware that we exist and that we weren't discovered, we were brought to the attention of the world because there were indigenous people here. We are now to assume the responsibility of our own branding, formulating our way of fashion, for creating new methodologies to practice what we do here, to make people live our experience. Because you know there is an old formula of people thinking that when you go to the Caribbean, you wear a Panama hat, a Bermuda short, and a Hawaiian shirt. And I must say that none of those geographic adjectives pertain to this part of the world. The silhouettes may be relevant, but certainly the branding with another geographic space is definitely detrimental to the promotion of what is essentially Caribbean, quintessentially Caribbean. So the Caribbean brand is a huge formula, and each space in the Caribbean insularly adds a splinter and a fragment that is a little different because we need to celebrate the differences while we acknowledge the similarities, you see? And but it all belongs to this whole wonderful Caribbean aesthetic, which is the way we color our world, the way we fashion our future, the way we shape our style, the way we acknowledge the positives of the mutation that happened here because of the historical experience. And it is not to dwell in the negatives of the historical experience, it is to move forward with the new elements that we have to offer the world. No longer are we to just join the bandwagon. That's what you would probably ask me before if I were not a person affected by my peer pressure. You need to bring something new to the table. We need to offer a new way forward in the thinking of how to resolve issues, how to interrelate with one another, how to practice new ways of doing things that are relevant to the climate, the conditions of transport, the infrastructure. Because we can't be putting square pegs in round holes. A lot of times the formulas are taken textbook straight out of a textbook of another space with a reference ill-suited to who we are and what we have become. So there is always a kind of grating in the attempts to practice that policy. We need to create our new policy. So this is almost in a political climate that I feel, and I suppose that came from my unionist parents, because it always has to affect the socio-political dynamic. It is, and all of that showers itself wonderfully on our arts, and therefore makes us feel that we have something fresh to offer. And there's this burgeoning possibility for going forward with the way we want to wear a silhouette, the kind of details we want to use, how we balance and give proportion to what we wear, and how we communicate and influence how you see me and make you feel better about your day because of how I interface with you with my style. So I think it's such a wondrous offering, this Caribbean way, this fresh approach, this happy paradise people perspective that of course they're negatives and of course they're downsides. But we have to take these positives and move forward. Let me give you an item with a swing tag that tells a little bit of my story, and you go back to a remote space in somewhere that is far from here and celebrate. You know, I went to the Caribbean, I went to Tobago, I went to Linden, a town in Guyana, I went to St. Lucia, and I went to Vieux Fort. And I met this person, and this design came from there. This piece of craft on my hand came from there. And he told me, or she told me, how she made it. It's made from the beads in the forest. It's made from the leather that is standing right there. Then I feel special about having interfaced with the space and carrying back piece of the culture and the style. Now, so Richard Young sees himself, therefore, and I'm still working that out because I never want to speak in finite terms, as I say, because I'm still evolving. And I think that's how humans are, that everything you do has to be for some sort of betterment of civilization, development of mankind, and now the current term is sustainable development. So you have to do things with the future in mind to make the future be empowered by what you have done now. So I am saying, let me be part of the architecture of a new way of thinking about style and fashion. Give that to the world as one of the options. It's not to denigrate any existing style brand, but it's just offering an alternative that a lot of people can benefit from because there are so many creative enthusiasts, so many creative artists and practitioners that need a space to shout and scream and celebrate what they are and who they and what they do, and therefore employ themselves in the love of doing what they do. Because too many times you hear people saying, I work, but they say work like if it's a chore, and then our language is so pregnant with things like thank God it's Friday and Monday blues, which means that work is a drudgery. So let some of the creative juice flow in these creative people to do the work that they were meant to do, which is natural for them to do, which means they can add to something, change direction, dynamize perspective, encourage new thinking, allow young people to be empowered. And if I could be part of that, just a part, and it doesn't necessarily mean I have to have a fat bank account. It just means that for what I'm doing, the powers that be find a way to utilize my service but remunerate me,
Well,
so that I can live well enough to continue doing. You
Richard,
know, so
Richard,
that's my mission.
in describing the Caribbean brand, you've given us quite a few pearls, and let me borrow one, and we can examine it together, and that is moving
Yeah.
forward. Well, before I do that, let me slip into the chat room. Lee said, "Hello, Mr. Young." G said, "Fascinating." Lee said, "The information being told couldn't be more accurate. We have not one culture but multi. We are colorful and loving it." Now let's go back to this pearl I just extracted. Moving forward, here's a group of young people in front of you, Richard.
Mm-hmm.
Many people sometimes get trapped in status quo, trapped in an event, a negative event that occurred, and they can't move forward, trapped in being tantalized if they dare to step into uncharted territory. Here is a group of young people that some of whom have those negative experiences. And talk to them, Richard. Talk to them about moving forward.
Well, I just conducted a program that I call the Model Image, Fashioning the Future You. And I think the program spoke to that. It is to dispel some of the fallacies about the glitz and glamour of fashion and the wonderful perks and a lot of the things that might border on what is artificial and unsustainable and pretensive. And I kind of sensitized the young people in front of me at the time to think about simple but extraordinary things that we can borrow from that world of art and beauty and reference it to our lives to empower ourselves and feel better about ourselves. So that's how I engage in the dialogue about improving your deportment. Not because you're going to model to walk next to Naomi Campbell or Tyra Banks, but you're going to feel better about yourself and carry yourself well. As a result, you can use that newfound power and use it in a merchandising way as a fashion model. So that is going to be one of the boons of this empowerment. I try to impart how to access confidence by relying on your own reference and telling your story very proudly, very unapologetically. This is how I live. This is what my grandmother taught me. This is what I felt. This is an experience I had in my school. This is how I resolved my problems through what looks like my negotiating ability, making them unearth the positives in themselves and then positioning themselves for making a decision as to how to go forward. It's not about just resolving everything. It's about creating an empowering position or a launch pad for you to move forward. And that's how I talk to young people, and it seems to be called motivational thinking. But I'd like to package it in these a priori thoughts. I just want to access them and get deep, real communicating practice from how we talk. So I tell them, I'm learning from you. You came here and you think it's just a space for you to learn from me. I'm learning from you. And we need to position ourselves with our new reality to move forward. And as a result of that, it can shape the new style. As a result of that, it boosts confidence. As a result of that, you can engage in solid conversation. You can go for job interviews. You can handle significantly important people without being too intimidated because you are equipped and you are empowered with simple tools of ethics and etiquette that make you feel that you have a right and a place. And actually Sunday coming, I'm going to what I call it is the passing out parade. And it's not a graduation per se, but it's for them to feel that they have achieved. So there's a certificate, and I'm going to continue doing once a month talks with them about how I am now more prepared to move forward in whatever way I choose and to cultivate style in doing it so I can enjoy doing it. You know, because that is what it is. You have to cultivate a style, the way you sit, the way you talk, the way you look when you're speaking to people, the way you enunciate, the way you pronounce your words, the way you look over your shoulder. People refer to you and gravitate to you when you have an aura, a sense of presence, the it factor. And it's not fake. You've cultivated it and you use it to empower you to move from stage one to two in whatever way. You could want to be a chemist, but you can be a chemist with style, with Caribbean style empowering you. You see?
Richard,
So I did it. Yeah.
sorry, but I want to mention this. You talked about style and the way you look over your shoulder and the way you conduct yourself and in terms of poise and grace. I remember Sonia Noel, who was a friend of yours and was here
Oh my,
last
my
Wednesday.
darling.
Yes, she mentioned finishing school in Guyana. What are your thoughts about finishing school?
Well, actually, Sonia and I have a beautiful history, and we connected and we are joined at the hip. I mean, we talk it openly. I mean, sometimes I think what she's thinking, she thinks what I'm thinking, and I have become sort of Guyanese. I'm always there, interface with the people. I speak with the government officials. She helps position me to get access to things for us to empower our young people in our realm. And I have been approached twice by the president, the former president and this president, together with Sonia, to find a way to empower people to improving their social graces. Because when you feel better about yourself, you start acting better, you start interfacing more meaningfully, you start having better interpersonal relationships, and therefore life starts to feel better. And some of the ugly is smoothed out, and some of the distractions are resolved, or you attempt to grapple it a little better. And it helps position you for the outside world as well, and for maturity, if you know how to handle and manage the moment. I work with a lot of beauty queens as well, and I'm trying to stray from the term. It's a delegate in a pageant, and a pageant has a whole dynamic by itself. So I train them to handle the moment. Handling the moment is the beginning, the precursor of an ambassador. So that when you handle the moment, you are dignified. You tell so much about yourself. You tell so much about your culture. You tell so much about where you come from, your history, your immediate family, your community, your country. It's such a powerful position if you can handle the moment. So that when you go on stage, dressed beautifully by all the other creative powers that have contributed to your look, you are now to sell all of what came before you. The style, the country from which you come, and the people who you represent. And you handle that moment as an ambassador, as a world citizen with dignity and with integrity. And that's what I feel that has been missing from some young people. When it's missing, I work in Guyana, and Sonny will tell you, and we have 200 people in front of us at the Ministry of Education. I remember one time the permanent secretary came and said, how come we have national programs and we don't have as much as that? We have 50 people and we do, and you have 200 people here. A lot of young men from multifaceted backgrounds. You never think want to be a wrong style because of all the earlier assumptions about being involved in style. And there they are, looking groomed, walking well, having another indulgence to add to the extracurricular, to make them feel better about self, to make them interact with people at different levels, to be able to do something and shape other people's perception of things that make up the cultural sphere. And when you see them in that light, when they come up and they hug me, I have tears shed, you have the most potent, the most tear-jerking comments coming from the young men as well as the young women. And I just feel sometimes burdened in the way that I can't do it alone. I can't do as much as I want. And I wish a lot more people celebrate the awareness of being Caribbean. And because I see how it empowers young people. I see how it makes them feel better about themselves. It makes them kind of drop off the integument of some of the ugly things. They shed the skin of some of the things that might have daunted their lives. And they feel like a new something has happened. You see it, and we had experiences when Sonia had invited Anna Horsford, which is a Hollywood actress to Guyana, and she came and she saw the transformation, and she spoke of it, and she said, "You all are not doing fashion. You all are using fashion to access souls. to make young people move forward, to change the dynamic in a country about what the responsibility of the cultural arts, and of giving people what to really be empowerment, because they're now empowered to say something. You allow them to have an influence on what we're doing. We let the young people come involved. They're stylists. They help do the set. They help create the events that we do. So that is true empowerment. So that that is what keeps. I know Sonia and we have done the Caribbean together in several other things, and she is a solid partner in with what I do.
Richard, I want to take a break, but before I go, see if you can answer this question. Tell us about this Caribbean fashion exposition and extravaganza called Cutting Style. Cutting Style. How is it connected to the Pan Am Games, Toronto 2015, and what is your role in all this?
Okay, certainly.
A wonderful experience.
I had a great time. I always have a great time when I come here. There was 1 week when I came here 3 times.
Very simple, good food, good friends, amazing staff. I can't complain.
We are back with Richard Young. Richard, the question was, tell us about the Caribbean fashion exposition extravaganza called Cutting Style. How is it connected to the Pan Am Games, Toronto 2015? And what is your role in it?
Well, Pan Am Games is a special event in terms of bringing the sporting community together from this part of the world. Central, South America, the Caribbean, and North America. It hosts over 45 countries with a variety of sporting activities. So it houses such a wonderful plethora of people that the organizers have decided to open up the cultural arm of the event. And they have created something called Panamania. And Panamania is going to accommodate expositions and cultural presentations that will cater to the persons who all celebrate the sport at that time for the 3 weeks or so. And one of the things that we were able, my partner Joan Pierre, who runs an event making company in Toronto, Trinidadian living there, we have been working on a project called Cutting Style in Toronto for a few years, which would be to carry some of our celebrated designers from Trinidad and Tobago to show off Trinidad and Tobago style, and ultimately Caribbean style in Toronto, attached to either our Independence Day or Republic Day celebrations for the Caribbean people in the diaspora. So we pitched at the Pan Am Games people, and they came to our last event, and our last event turned out quite well. And as a result of that, we were awarded the show Cutting Style, which is a Caribbean expression for how you carry the style and how you make the style and how you present the style. And the show is going to be a Caribbean exposition of fashion. I am the creative director, and I am very fortunate. I feel honored to have been given this. And I feel that all of what I was doing before in this melting pot of culture in the Caribbean was to prepare me for this, working with people throughout the region, because I do Suriname Fashion Week, which I'm leaving in the next 2 weeks to do. I worked in Cayenne and French Guiana with their Fashion Week. I worked with Haiti. I do St. Lucia. I do in Antigua. I work in St. Vincent. I work in Trinidad and Tobago. I've been to Guadeloupe. I just came back from Guadeloupe 2 months ago, and Martinique and St. Kitts and Jamaica. So I feel that this interaction was giving me the position to harness talent, so that now I can show it off to the world in a beautiful space where a lot of the world is looking on at. as well as to touch base. I have a very good friend who is in North America, Cambridge Delfresh, who worked as a model with me from St. Vincent when I went to St. Vincent to do shows in the 90s, and who went on to become a renowned makeup artist working in Broadway productions and operas. And I mean, that is just the way that we Caribbean people need to network and access and position people and share the talent
I agree.
and allow the world to feel the talent. I work with a Bahamian photographer who lives in New York, I think. Yes, he lives in New York. That's John Thompson. And he comes through the Caribbean. A lot of the events that I might be working with. And all of these talents, I think, need to cohere. So Sonia is going to bring one or two designers from Guyana, and all of the people I've interfaced with, Warda Marika in Suriname, and JR from Cayenne, and Vanda Neil Gardner from Antigua, and Russell Lake and from St. Lucia. They're all going to pull talent together so that we can have the best talent in a 3-day extravaganza called Cutting Style, allowing people to vend their stuff, but also for other people looking in who are unaware of how far we have gone in the development of our own style, to access it, to feel the culture, to taste, touch, see, smell the culture, really experience it, as well as to purchase. So it is a financial boon to the practitioners of the industry to be seen on an international platform like Pan Am Games, and it actually is going to allow the transfer of garments to some kind of remuneration, which is really what the business of fashion must be, and that has to be. In terms of all of the cultural influence, it must merchandise itself into a position where it's commerce. It needs to become part of one of the economic sectors of our developing societies in the region, and I think expositions like Cutting Style and Pan Am Games. I'm so glad to be working with June Fair. She's actually in Trinidad right now. So we have some meetings to fine-tune what we're doing. And we are trying to carry the best fashion talent of the region to be honored, to be showcased, to get the chance to interface in a metropolis of first world space, and hope that we get some recognition for the time that we have been honing the craft. So I'm looking forward to that with bated breath, and so all of what I'm doing now is in preparation for it.
Well, Richard,
all of these showcases I'm doing.
Richard, I have made a decision, and I hope you agree with me. You must return to CWS. Oh my gosh, this conversation does not lend itself enough time. So I'm going to ask you a few rapid fire questions, because I just want to, I say every guest is like a gem, and a gem has many facets, only that most often we only get to glimpse a few of those facets, and we form an opinion of the person. But what I like to do on CWS is to twist the gem a little and expose the various facets. So I want to twist your gem a little bit.
Yeah.
What do you enjoy most about the Caribbean artists community?
I love the expression, and I like to encourage people to tell their stories, because some people are working in in this beautiful world of creating a new dimension for the world, and they are not aware of its potency.
I see.
So my gratification is in helping them unearth it. If I have to say I have an expertise, my expertise is to make you access that part of you, to share what you have, to speak resplendently about who you are and what makes you tick. And that is my greatest satisfaction, to see when somebody is becoming, and I enjoy the interface. You are constantly being enlightened. You're constantly being nourished from the stories, the multiplicity of stories that come from people who work in the creative realm. And that keeps me ticking. That keeps me going. I get up and sometimes there's so much to do, but it's enough. It makes me feel sated and it honors me and it humbles me at the same time. Because sometimes, like earlier this year, I got an award in Barbados for contribution to a Lifetime Achievement Award for contributing to development of Caribbean fashion. And that was very humbling.
Congratulations.
I felt honored. Both Sonia and I received those awards actually.
Congratulations.
Yeah, the first time those awards were given at the Caribbean Music, at Barbados Music, the Barbados Music Festival, and Barbados Music Awards, that's the correct title. And they extended themselves to fashion and music and the arts. And those high points are sufficient really for me to keep going and always to keep notching on the totem pole, as it were, to make another mark as we move up. And I use totem pole, and that probably is a reference that comes out of my Amerindian ancestry, because people are shocked sometimes. What is your admixture, Richard? Yeah. Well, I'm Amerindian, black, and for want of a better word, some Caucasian, but I mean, I don't know how you really see that, but I am very proud of my Amerindian ancestry, and so sometimes things that might happen or seem natural to me, I can probably trace it to that indigenous first peoples who were here, and then I am very, very encouraged by the versatility and the layering. There are lots of layers in the African experience. You can hear it in the music, in the percussion, in the textures. And I try to use all of that to encourage and pull people together and make them identify with it. And that's what keeps me going.
Let me ask you. Let me ask you this then. Now that you've mentioned the layering in the African ancestry and the colors and texture of your Amerindian ancestry and so on. When you're in your quiet moments and you're thinking creative thoughts, what sort of music or melodies play at the edges of your mind or play in your thoughts? And what sort of colors usually flirt with you when you're in your quiet moments creating?
Wonderful question. I am inclined to colors that are earthy and terracottas and olives and mustards and sunshine yellows and sunset yellows and browns and even the stylized version of that, which is the bronzes and rust and gold and so those are my natural colors. And certainly when the music comes up, because I was always peeping into my aunt's world, there was always the drum, there was always the tassa, there was always this anxious music that lends itself sometimes to jazz, that gets you off your center, but it awakens something else and rouses something. And that's the music I use. And it's very eclectic. And I resent the terms used sometimes when people say exotic and ethnic. It limits the scope of the music. And sometimes we call all the mutations world music. And that, again, I think is slightly insulting. It is a lot more dynamic than limiting it to that. The Afro-Indo mutations, the syncretic sounds that come over from the continent that mixes with an undertone of Caribbeanness comes up. We have such fantastic music. I do shows and it's only Caribbean music. And that is not saying I'm disrespecting the other musics of the world, but I think we have enough intonation and enough suggestion inside of our music to tell wonderful stories for the fashion, as well as for the background of some of our animation, as well as the background to our way of advertising and campaigning. We can rely on us. So those are the things that happen in my quiet movement, and it really excites me. So there is a lot of drum, and there is a lot of percussion, and there is a lot of Indo-Afro, and there's a lot of even Arab music, as it has how it has played itself out here, because it obviously gets it in insinuations and inflections from the Caribbean side of the Arab experience. And I love what comes out of that.
When are you most happy, Richard?
That's what.
When are you most happy?
When am I most happy?
Mm-hmm.
I'm most happy if I have a successful production And the success is not in terms of the money made, but in telling the story well and hearing. Like I did a show once and I called it Epiphany. And the way we did the production management and the rollout of the show, I was hearing the whole country of Antigua talking about the show. And they were asking, what is Epiphany? Why are they talking about white? I have to get my white outfit to go to the show because I did this subtle teasing of what the show may be without saying what it was and seeing how it informed the space and how everybody was driven and drawn to it. And therefore I knew it's working. And then when the show happened and there were 1,200 people sitting in the hall and there were people in white saris and people with white Erica Badu head ties and men in kurtas and men in dashikis and women in kaftans, and they were all white, sitting in the audience, not attending the show, but participating in the show, as it were, creating the backdrop for the post-show promotions of the show, because it all lends to the storytelling of what we do on the stage. Then I feel I have mixed the content of the form and I've blended the audience with the performer, and we all part of unraveling a story. And that is what I celebrate when I'm able to get that mesh well.
What
so
are
I'm
you
constantly in pursuit of it.
What are you most thankful for?
That is a hard question because my brother always reawakens that in me. Tell me 3 good things about yourself. Tell me what you are most thankful for, because sometimes I'm always so hard on myself, and people like Sonia and others would know that I am very self-critical. And I have just seen in the last 2 years a certain awareness has happened that, Richard, you probably will give him a gift. And the acknowledgement of the gift will be will lead to successful ventures, would lead to you doing it responsibly. Because I have met so many spiritual people in my life who look into my eyes and see something more and talk about my purpose in the leading, in the direction of a way forward for young people and for philosophy building in this part of the world, that I didn't take it so responsibly. I was just doing. But now I accept the responsibility, because it probably is a gift, and that's my blessing, that when somebody wants to develop something, I have formula, and I have been working on techniques and devices to quickly access it and to potently deliver it. And therefore, that's what I have to be thankful for. I don't always get it on cue, but I know that we always touch a nerve. We always awaken a sense. We always scratch on the surface of moving in another direction. And therefore, I have to say I'm thankful for that, and that's what will have to be my blessing, and I have to use it responsibly. So that's what I've also accepted. It's a burden that I relish to act out in a responsible way.
Richard, time is upon us. And I must ask you this question. I ask each of my guests. What makes you laugh out loud?
Well, I always see things in a very comic way. And I find man's attempt to always organize and apply logic that sometimes is not necessary sometimes is extremely funny. For instance, somebody who is falling and attempting to and pretending that they're not falling makes for a very funny scene, because they are grabbing at the space, they are pretending that they are not dislocated. They are, instead of dealing with the reality of the fall and probably cushioning the fall, the whole appearance that you're not falling makes it hysterically funny. And that's why I see a lot of times in our effort to create order and to deify order, make order look like it's a god above us, and apply it sometimes irrationally. Apply it sometimes when it's not needed, when you just need to probably just live and let live. it makes some of our actions hysterically funny.
You know,
And then I will have a great laugh.
Richard.
So I laugh at myself a lot of times.
First of all, thank you for coming. I really enjoy this, and you're coming back very soon because we have to have a part two.
Okay.
Listening to you,
It was an honor being here.
sitting here listening to you, Richard, I am humbled. I feel as a student about Caribbean culture, Caribbean arts, Caribbean history. You've given us wow, an oasis, I should say, of words. For the lack of a better word, you've given us words like epiphany and anthropology and technique and formulas. But one of the things that stood out to me that I must make mention is you talk of music, of certain kinds of music like the tassa drum with its anxious rhythm and how it displaces us from our center. And what came to mind is it is important sometimes for us to be displaced from our center because it is our journey. We have a natural affinity to go back to center. And it is our journey back to the center where we have our best and most and best self-discoveries. So I like how you ended just now, but what makes you laugh out loud is the irony of us trying to apply logic to everything and to apply order to everything. And sometimes we place these things above us. But it is in that paradox where we find most of our self-discoveries, to resist the logic and to resist the order. So thank you so much, Richard. And
thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
It is a pleasure. Very soon. Well, good night.
Good night to you.
All right. Bye-bye.
It was just a wonderful experience.
I had a great time. I always have a great time when I come here. there was 1 week when I came here 3 times.
Very simple, good food, good friends, amazing staff. I can't complain.